So again, I want to welcome you to the webinar on how to apply for the California Relief Grant. I am Lucy Salcido-Carter, the Public Policy Director at CalNonprofits. For those of you who don't know, CalNonprofits is a policy alliance of more than 10,000 organizations and the voice of the nonprofit community in California. We advocate with legislators, with the state administration, and with others on behalf of California's nonprofits to protect and enhance our ability to serve our communities. Nonprofits are eligible for these grants that you're going to hear about today because of advocacy that we have done and that our allies have done. I want you to know that our advocacy really can make a difference. The focus of the webinar today is on the California Relief Grant Program, but we also really encourage you to advocate with your local government officials to help make sure that some of the federal relief funding that is coming to your cities and counties goes to nonprofits. Now is a great time to do that local level advocacy as well, so that more nonprofits can get those funds too. But going back to the topic of this webinar, the California Relief Grant Program, I wanted to also remind you that CalNonprofits is a program partner for this program. And we're here to guide you through the application process. So we hope that for this round 6 of the grant program, you'll choose to apply through CalNonprofits portal and show the strength of the nonprofit network. And I know we'll post in the chat box the URL for that portal. Again, a reminder that you will all get links to the recording of the webinar and to the slides. If you have questions about the program and application process after this webinar, you can reach out to CalNonprofits' awesome program manager for the grant program, and that's Sue Sigler. I'll be turning the webinar over to her in just a minute, but her contact information is here. And you can also call the Lendistry helpline included here. Lendistry is the intermediary organization that is running the grant program. So we'll put this contact information in the chat for you, but you'll also get it in your follow-up email. And with that, I want to turn things over to Sue. Sue, to you.
Thank you, Lucy, and welcome everyone. Today, we're going to focus initially for just a few minutes on questions that are common for people who have already applied, and then we're going to be moving into reviewing how to apply for the program. I want to reiterate what Lucy said, that we are focusing today on nonprofits who are applying for the program. If you are a small business or a for-profit organization and you'd like to apply, I encourage you to visit careliefgrant.com. At the top, you'll see a tab for webinars, and there are multiple webinars happening every day of the week for small businesses, and that is some of the best places to get your questions answered. There are a lot of similarities between the two applications, but we may not be able to answer all your questions about small business applications today. Again, as Lucy said, there's no need to take notes. You'll receive the slides and the recording. And the recording will also be posted on the CalNonprofits channel on YouTube, so look for us there. Today, we'll be talking primarily about applying in round 6, and we want to note that round 6 is the final application round for this program. And you will see this slide again at the end of the presentation. So if you haven't had a chance to copy those URLs down, you'll see it again. Next slide, please. For those of you who have already applied and would like to check your application status, you can always log back into your application. If you selected CalNonprofits as your application partner, this is the link that you'll use that you see up on your screen at calnonprofits.mylendistry.com. Or you can always search your email for the email that you received from Lendistry that had your temporary password in it. Whenever you started an application, folks will receive a temporary password via email, and it has a link to return to your application. So if you're going to be a new applicant, we'll alert you to that. You want to hold on to that because it's handy to have anytime you want to return to your application. I also want to note a few fun facts, which are that you can only receive one grant from this program. So if you have already applied to the California Relief Grant Program, irrespective of what round that was, congratulations, and you're done. Don't apply again. If you are getting conflicting messages in your emails from Lendistry, chances are it means that you started more than one application in an earlier round. Every application, whether it's complete or not, will have a unique application number. So if you're getting conflicting messages, try to remember back if you ever started a second application and to look at the one that you completed and that you want to be considered. If you applied in round 4, but you're not seeing a status change on your application, it's still showing you as waiting either on the wait list or waiting to be reviewed. Round 4 is taking a little longer because of the unique qualifications that were put on round 4 for arts and cultural organizations by the legislature. So continue to sit tight, and please note that round 4 has a unique application link. So go back to that password email that you received. Don't try to get to a round 4 application through the calnonprofits.mylendistry.com. It won't work for you. If you got an email that says for any reason you were not selected from the program, you were disqualified, it is important to find out why. So you can reply to that email, because that is from an individual, and ask what was the reason that you were declined. If your organization fails to meet timetables or doesn't have required documents available, or for some other reason isn't eligible for the program, then it may be the case that you're ineligible for the program. But if there's an issue that can be rectified and you can reapply in round 6, you'll want to know about that. So one of the other things, and we're going to go over in just a moment who needs to reapply and for round 6 and who doesn't. But in the meantime, next slide, please. I want to highlight something very, very important for every applicant, whether you've already applied or whether you've got an application coming up, which is that when you log back in to see your status, you can see that red arrow is pointing to a code. It says applied for, and then there is a code in blue after it. CRG, if you see only CRG, that means that you completed a small business application. If you intended to complete a nonprofit organization, you need to reapply in round 6 because applications cannot be modified. They can't switch back and forth between the two programs. You can't like call up and say, oh, I meant to fill out the other one. Can you just change it over for me? You do have to reapply. If you see CRG NPO, that means you use the nonprofit application. And if you see CRG AC NPO, that means that you applied in round 4 for the arts and cultural application. So Lendistry must have an application on the correct form in order to be able to process it. Applications that were provided on the incorrect form, unfortunately, have to be denied. So next slide, please. When you log back into your application, these are an example of some of the slides that you might see. If your application is incomplete, you don't need to wait until Wednesday. You can log back in and complete your application at any time. Please note that many, again, as I said earlier, many people who started more than one application will have an incomplete application in the system. Even if you wrote in and asked to have that application withdrawn, it remains there and has an application number, and you may continue to get communications about it. If your application says either that you're on the waiting list or you're awaiting selection process, your application has been received, it has not yet been reviewed. So you are on the waiting list or awaiting selection process. If you see that and you've checked your code and you are on the correct form of application, either nonprofit or small business, you do not need to reapply. If you see selected pending validations, that means that your application has been selected for review and Lendistry is verifying your information. There is nothing for you to do unless you hear from Lendistry that they have questions or want you to provide some additional documentation. If you see in closing and documents documents are out, it's pending funding. That means your grant has been approved. Once your grant is approved, you will receive something from DocuSign that is a grant agreement, and you need to sign that grant agreement and return it. I want to take a moment to say, please be sure that you are monitoring your junk mail and your spam filter, because folks sometimes say to me, I haven't heard anything, but they have. It just went to a place that they don't typically see it. So you'll want to be monitoring your email and any email addresses that you may have used, because you cannot use the same email address in more than one application. So monitor all of the applications that you might have started, and make sure you're looking for those communications from Lendistry and from DocuSign. And of course, once your grant is funded, that will change your status there. That is how you will know there is money headed to your bank. Lendistry doesn't typically send out notifications when money is headed to your bank. I want to also make a note that all of the information that we are giving you today is available on the frequently asked questions on our website at CalNonprofits.org. So anytime you want to check this out again, please head back to CalNonprofits.org and click on the red links for our FAQs. Pardon me. Some of the other questions that I typically get is, if I'm on the wait list, do I need to reapply? If you are waitlisted or you are awaiting selection process, do not reapply. You don't need to do that. Applications automatically continue to roll forward until either all applications have been selected or until all the money has been expended. There is no order on the wait list, so you're not ranked. It's not a first come first serve program in any of the rounds. You're not ranked according to when you apply, and so there is no way to get your application viewed more quickly or to change it so that it appears more favorable. And next slide, please. And I'll introduce our next guest, Janet Perez Shensky from Lendistry, who is going to go over who should apply when in round 6.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So the question is, do I need to apply again in round 6? If your status says on the wait list or waiting selection process, and you verified that you used the correct application form, you do not need to reapply. You are going to be automatically considered for round 6. So yes, you do need to reapply if you use the wrong application form from an earlier application. So if you are a nonprofit organization and when you log in, you see CRG and that's all you see, there's no NPO after that, that means you will have to apply for round 6 because you applied for a for-profit application. First-time applicants, if you haven't applied for previous rounds, you can apply for round 6. First applied in round 4, but were not selected, not funded, you can apply for round 6. First applied in round 4, but don't know yet. So if you don't know yet and you see a waiting selection status, that means that you are on the wait list for round 4, and round 4 is going to be open until about May 17th, because some nonprofits are waiting on extensions. And so if you have been notified that we are going to extend that date till May 17th, only if you haven't submitted your tax return, we will communicate with you, so you don't have to apply for round 6 if you applied during round 4. Next slide.
Okay, we're going to stop for just a moment here and ask Lucy if we have any questions in the Q&A from our current applicants.
We do indeed. Let's see, you've answered quite a few of them, so thank you so much for that. We had a question about if a nonprofit did use the incorrect application, they used the for-profit application, should they use a different email address when they reapply as a nonprofit?
Thank you, Lucy. We really want to stress that the way that Lendistry tracks applications through its system is via the email address. And so if you reapply for any reason, you need to use a different email address than any prior applications. And again, a reminder to then be sure to monitor it for communications from Lendistry and DocuSign.
Okay, thank you. And let's see. So people who have applied in round one and are still waitlisted are concerned that nobody has looked at their application yet. And you did say that they should be carried over from round to round. But from the back end, has somebody reviewed that application yet? Or what has happened so far with the application?
One of the things that we want to stress is that I do talk to a lot of people who applied in round one and round two and haven't heard yet. So one of the things that we want to stress is there is vastly more funding available in the subsequent rounds than there was in either round one or round two. And in rounds one and two, only about 1 in 9 of the applications were able to be funded, so fewer than 10%. And right now, I think there's over 400,000 applications that Lendistry has received thus far. They're processing them at an average rate of about 4,000 a day, which is huge, but still you can see it takes some time to get through 400,000 applications. So we know it's a long time to wait. We know everybody really needs that funding for their small business or their nonprofit. But there really is nothing you can do at this time except wait to hear from Lendistry. There's no way to amend your application for additional consideration. I want to remind everybody that in this program, it is not like a traditional nonprofit grant program in the respect that you're not competing on the merits of your services and programs. You'll notice that if you've already filled out the application, you know there is no narrative on the application. It is there are a set of qualifications that you have to meet, and if you meet those, then your application is reviewed, and Lendistry is pulling thousands of applications every day for new review, and there's nothing you can do but sit tight and monitor your email and check your application status online.
Thank you for that, Sue. And people were curious to know if nonprofits have been receiving grants in the early rounds.
Yes, they have. I've talked to lots of nonprofits, and we've seen the Office of the Small Business Advocate in California also has some preliminary data about who was awarded in some earlier rounds, and looking at that, we can see lots of those CRG NPO codes on that list. So we know a lot of nonprofits are getting funded.
Okay, great. And then going back to the question of whether you've applied using the correct application form, if, again, a nonprofit applied using the for-profit application, do they need to do anything with that erroneous for-profit application, like try to delete it or something like that? Or do they just let it be and then apply as a nonprofit using a different email address?
Janet, I'm going to let you take that one if you would.
Correct. So I would encourage you to apply for round 6 with the with the nonprofit application. However, if you applied for with a for-profit application, you can contact Lendistry, and we'll go ahead and make sure that that for-profit application is unqualified because it's not the correct application type. However, we'll contact you if we have 2 applications on hand, and say, for example, with the nonprofit application you were selected, we'll contact you to verify which application is the correct application and go on from there. But I do encourage you to contact Lendistry and let them know that that is the wrong application type, and then proceed to apply for round 6 with the correct application type.
Thank you. And it's helpful whenever you're communicating with Lendistry to know the application number that you're referring to. And if you did want to withdraw an application that was done on the wrong form, you can send that email to careliefgrant@lendistry.com. And that's right on their website, real clearly right on the front page, their email address.
Okay, I think a lot of people who have been waitlisted and carried from one round to another are just curious about what their chances are now in this upcoming final round. Do we have any information about how much funding is left in the pot? And also, well, let's start with that one.
Sure. We have a lot of folks who say, oh, so many grants have been made already. There's probably not money left for me. But round 6 has over $700 million available. So I strongly encourage everybody, if you haven't applied yet, or if you need to reapply, go ahead and do that for round 6.
Okay, and then is there any information that you can share about the selection criteria? I think people are also curious about that who have applied and been carried over from round to round. Was there something else they should have done to their application to emphasize certain parts of their program related to the selection criteria?
So I want to say that Lendistry does have some priorities. We have and has not shared with us fully how the algorithm works that selects their applications for consideration. If you have already filled out an application, or when you do, you will notice that you're asked questions like, is this a minority or women-led organization? Does the organization serve primarily low and middle income people? There is also a small set aside for rural areas. And so your zip code will be used to analyze that. And so the answer is yes, there are some priorities for certain organizations, but that does not comprise 100% of the grants available at all. So there are some priorities. People ask me, oh, if I don't meet those priorities, is it worth it for me to apply? Absolutely, it is worth it for you to apply.
Okay, thank you. And then what if you have gotten a notice that says not selected? Your application was not selected. Can people reapply?
That depends. You will want to find out the reason that you were not selected. So not selected means your application was declined. Lendistry is not planning to fund that application. And you'll want to contact Lendistry to find out what was the reason. If the reason was something like you used the wrong application form, you can go ahead and apply. But if you didn't meet one of the basic qualifications for the program, it wouldn't be worth your time to reapply then.
Okay, and this goes back to the selection criteria. There's a question in the application about jobs creation. In order to apply, do you have to have created new jobs?
You do not have to have created new jobs, nor do you actually have to have staff at all. All volunteer organizations are also eligible to apply. But, and those questions are a little confusing. We're going to go over that in a moment. And it's also available on our FAQs on our website at CalNonprofits.org as to how you want to answer those questions.
Okay, I think a lot of the other questions are ones that have to do more with completing the application. So, and we're going to have more time for questions later. So I think maybe this is a good time to move along with more information, and then I'll pop in with more questions later. Does that sound good?
Thank you, Lucy.
You
And
bet.
we're going to go to the next slide and turn to Janet again.
So make sure that, so when you're applying, it's completely free. It's free of charge. Communication from Lendistry, if you receive any emails from our team members, just ensure that it ends in lendistry.com. So for example, my first and last name is Janet Perez, so it would be my email address and then at lendistry.com. So just be aware of that. And Lendistry's website is carereliefgrant.com, not .org.com. So just be aware of that. If you see if you go on a website and it's a .org website, that's not the California Relief Grant website. It ends in .com.
Next slide, please.
So eligibility, you have to be a 501c3, C6, or 19. Our corporations, unincorporated associations, or cooperatives file a 990 informational tax return. We will need 2019 tax return. Annual revenue, at least a minimum of 1,000 up to 2.5 million. In operation on or before June 1st, 2019. Have a physical address in California, and remain open or have a clear reopening plan. So that's really important as well. Not eligible, go ahead, Sue.
Thank you. I want to mention that as we look at who is and who isn't eligible, this program is not intended for startups and new organizations. You have to have whether you had your 501c3, 6, or 19 on June 1st, 2019, you had to at least have been in operations providing your programs, providing a program or service on or before that date in order to qualify for this program. The legislature intended it as relief for organizations that were established and trying to continue operating through the period that we've been affected by COVID-19. Additionally, if you are a department of another organization, we saw this a lot in round 4 with the arts and cultural organizations, where maybe the art department is part of a university or museum. Unfortunately, those are not eligible. The applicant has to be the organization that holds the 501c. Also, unfortunately, fiscally sponsored organizations are not eligible. Fiscal sponsors are eligible to apply, but they can only submit one application on behalf of themselves as a 501c3 and not on behalf of all of the organizations that they might sponsor. Also, religious institutions. However, there are some caveats to that. Many religious organizations also provide significant social services. And so if you are a religious organization and you're involved in providing services like a school or a daycare or youth services, et cetera, please review the FAQs on our website to see if you qualify, because again, if a religious organization is providing significant social services, it may qualify. We mentioned earlier, you don't need to have staff to qualify. And that one of the most important things that Janet mentioned just a moment ago is that a 2019 990 filing is required to qualify for this grant. And we know that many nonprofit organizations take an extension on the filing, and that this year that extension is through May 17th. If you have already applied but have not yet been able to provide your 2019 990, Lendistry will still accept that up until May 17th. So when you do have it available, return to your application, upload it in the section with whatever other 990 you may have provided. And I'll note that that is a change from rounds 1 and 2 when the statute allowed Lendistry to be a little more flexible. But now a 2019 990 is required. And if you file the 2019 N or the postcard, you will need to provide additional documentation because it doesn't show your annual revenue. So again, you can find out more about that on our FAQs. And lastly, I'll say that I get the question sometimes. We have a lot of good people who have their own small businesses, but are also involved in nonprofit organizations. So the question is, if I have both, can I apply for both a nonprofit and a small business application? And the answer is yes, you can do that. Any individual can submit one nonprofit, one small business application, but not any more than that. But you do want to use different email addresses on each of those applications, as we mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. The Lendistry system requires that you are working in Google Chrome as your browser. You will get glitches and error messages most likely if you are not certain to be working in Google Chrome. If you're not familiar with that, you can look it up. It's real easy. It really just takes a moment to install on your computer and use as your browser. And there are a lot more tech tips, more than we can go over today. And so please read that section on our FAQs at CalNonprofits.org to help you get through the tech issues that can sometimes pop up on the application. We'll also mention that the application opens this week on Wednesday at 9 a.m. The round 5 was a tad late. Please don't be calling me at 9:10 if the application's not open yet. If for any reason it's not open precisely at 9, please be a little patient, and that you can make your application through Tuesday, May 4th, that's next week at 5 p.m. And once again, note that applications are not first come, first served. All applications get consideration in every round. Next slide, please. One of the other frequent questions I get is, do I have to repay this funding? And no, you do not have to repay this funding. It is a grant. It is not a loan. And but one of the things that you also want to make sure with respect to applying for this program is that your state filings are up to date with the Secretary of State. And so there's more information again about that on our FAQs if you need that. But in order to start to prepare, you want to gather the documents that you're going to need. One of those is your 2019 Form 990. And that could be the 990EZ, the full Form 990, or the 990N or postcard. If you file the postcard, you will need other documentation to show your revenue. One of those could be the state RRF-1 or your statement of information. And again, those things are listed in the FAQs on our website. You'll need your articles of incorporation, and if applicable, a certificate of organization, a fictitious name registration, which is also known as a DBA. Most people know that as doing business as. So if your formal name is different than the one you generally operate under, you usually have a certificate for that. And a government issued business license. Not all nonprofits are required to have that, so you may or may not have it. A government issued ID for the applicant, such as your driver's license or passport, but something that is issued by a unit of government. It does not have to be California. Say you had an out-of-state driver's license, that is acceptable, and it must be current. It cannot be expired. So, you'll want to gather that with all of your other documents, and also the application certification form. The application certification is not to be confused with the application. The application is done completely online. There are no paper submissions accepted. There's nowhere to print and mail your application. It is all filled out online. But along with your supporting documents, you'll need to upload something called the application certification, where you testify that everything you've said in the application is true. That form is available on the Lendistry site at CAReliefgrant.com. It's also available, there's a click through on our website at CalNonprofits.org. So you just need to obtain that, fill it out, save it to your computer, and upload it again with the other documents when you make your application. Next slide, please. So now that you've got your documents in order, here's the information you're going to need. You're going to need your gross revenue for 2019. And for those of you that do the full form of the 990 who file that, it is line 12. If you file the 990EZ, it is line 9. If you file the 990N or postcard, again, we mentioned you'll need some state documentation to show your revenue. And then you'll also want to know, there will the application will do a comparison between your gross revenue and expenses from a 6-month time period in 2019 to a 6-month time period in 2020. That is how the COVID impact on your organization is assessed. Generally, that is if you have, if you have shown either a significant loss of revenue, or many places had to expend a lot more funds to keep operating in the COVID environment, maybe needed new equipment and supplies, extra staff, that kind of thing. So you'll need to know what your gross revenue is for the second and third quarters of calendar year 19. That's April 1 to September 30th, 1919, and the same information for the same period in, did I say 1919? 2019. And the same period in 2020. We know we've got some nonprofits that have been in existence that long, but we don't want to send you for looking for those records. I also get a question a lot about what are eligible expenses. Eligible expenses are a lot of your regular operating expenses, things like staff, rent or mortgage payments, occupancy expenses like insurance and utilities, and in particular, things that you needed to spend money on to continue to operate in the COVID environment. Equipment is an eligible expense if you needed it to continue to operate in the COVID environment. If you needed things like personal protective equipment or additional storage or things like that, all eligible expenses under this grant. Although I will note that there is not a one-to-one relationship between your expenses and the amount that you are awarded, as is typical in other nonprofit grants. There are only 3 award amounts that people are eligible for, and we're going to touch on that in just a moment. Next slide, please. Now that you're ready to start your application, you can do that in one of 2 ways. You can go to careliefgrant.com where you can see a full list of all of the partners that you might choose as an application partner. You can find services in other languages. You can find a 100-page application guide. You'll find that certification form that you're going to need, and you'll find webinars and other information that's happening every day. Every applicant has to choose an application partner, and what that means is your application partner will provide you with two things. One of those will be a link, which is your portal to start an application. You'll see the CalNonprofits portal address right up there, calnonprofits.mylendistry.com. And you are not required to choose any particular partner. You can choose anyone you like, although I will note that CalNonprofits specializes in working with nonprofit organizations. Most of the other partners specialize in working with small businesses, but you are free to choose anyone you like as your partner. And then you want to remember who you selected, because if you can't remember your application link later down the road, we can find that pretty quickly if we know who you selected for your partner. And next slide, please. When you go to start an application and you click on your partner portal, you're going to see this screen. You can ignore on the right if you're a new applicant and this is your first time. You can ignore that. If you're starting, and even if you did apply before and you're starting a completely new application, start on where that red arrow is showing, click here to apply. Next slide, please. And then please double check. This is how you double check that you are on the right form of application. It will either say grant program for nonprofits or grant program for for-profits. So please double check, because it's heartbreaking to go through all that work to fill out the wrong form of application. Next slide, please. As we start the application, you'll be asked to fill in your basic information, name, email address, etc. And I think that that is pretty self-explanatory, except a reminder here that if you have started, whether you completed or not, even if you just started any other application, it remains in the system, and you're starting a new one, use a different email address. And here's a tip, which is you cannot save a copy of this application once you've completed it. So you can't save your work, you can't print it out. If you want to save what you've done, you need to take screenshots of each of the screens on the application form. Next slide, please. We're going to review some of the questions that nonprofits find a little stickier on the application, but another reminder that all of this is available on the FAQs on our website. So next, we're going into information about what's called the owner details. And Lendistry understands that nonprofits don't have owners. So where you see owner, the nonprofit translation you can make in your head is applicant. We're looking for the applicant's name. The applicant should be someone that Lendistry can verify is associated with your nonprofit organization. They will look to the 990. Does this person sign the 990? They will look to your statement of information on file with the state. Is this person listed there? So in terms of choosing the applicant, it should be someone that Lendistry can verify is easily is associated with your organization and authorized to apply. The CEO or ED is best, but it can be, again, anyone who is authorized to apply. That person will need to provide their personal data. And by that, I mean their social security number and date of birth. That is very unusual in a nonprofit application, we understand, but it is required for this one. And then that second red arrow that you'll see down at the bottom of the page points to a question that says percent of ownership. Again, Lendistry understands that no one owns a nonprofit organization. There's no wrong answer in that field, but we recommend you fill in 100%. Next slide, please. And as we mentioned earlier, there are some priority areas. So this is one of the places that you'll be asked questions related to that. That red arrow points to a question that says, please confirm that your organization serves one of the top 4 priority areas. Those priority areas are food and housing, workforce development, and one other. And oh, there we go, thank you. food, housing, childcare, and workforce development. If you do not fall under one of those, you can check other. That will not disadvantage your application. So please don't think that you have to say yes in order to qualify for a grant, because you don't. Next slide, please. And now this is probably the most confusing page of all for our nonprofit applicants, entitled "How Can We Help You?" And you're going to be asked to choose some categories. And Lendistry recognizes that nonprofits don't necessarily fit neatly into these categories. So you need to do your best, make a choice, and move on, because you cannot go to subsequent parts of the application until you've completely filled out the fields. So you'll see there's drop-down menus, and we'll ask for people, please, to just fill out as best you can. And we talked earlier about those questions about number of employees and jobs created. And here's, again, this is in our FAQs on our website, but you'll be asked, what is the number of full-time employees in 2020? That's as of 12/31/20. And you want to express that in full-time equivalents. So, or FTEs. So if that's a new term for you, the way that that works is if your standard work week is 40 hours and you have someone whose standard work week is 10 hours, they are a 0.25 or 1/4 FTE. If you had somebody who worked 20 hours, they would be a 0.5 FTE. If you had somebody working 40, they would be 1 FTE. So you figure out your FTEs and add that together. And with respect to the questions about jobs created and retained, jobs retained is the number of employees that you had on 12/31/20, and jobs created are the number of new jobs or employees who were recalled, laid off and recalled in 2020. One of the commonly asked questions we also get is, what about contractors? Should I include contractors in my employee count? And the answer is no. You should only apply for people who get a W-4, who are W-4 employees. And the reason for that is because contractors are considered to have their own small business, and they can apply on their own behalf directly to the program. Next slide, please. Now we say, what grant amount can we apply for? And you can apply for one of 3 grant amounts. Your grant amount is based on your annual revenue, as it was stated on your 990 or other documents for 2019. If your annual revenue is between $1,000 and $100,000, you're eligible to apply for a $5,000 grant. If you're $100,000 to $1 million, you're eligible for a $15,000 grant. And if you're $1 million to $2.5 million, you're eligible for a $25,000 grant. I get a lot of questions about from people whose income or varied for one reason or another. Something happened in 2019 such that they didn't have any income, or they had too much income. And I get questions about, can that be adjusted because it's not a typical situation for us? And unfortunately, the answer is no. Maybe a good example is you received pass-through grants that you didn't get to keep. You had to pass on to other people, and so it looks like your revenue is inflated. And unfortunately, you cannot back those out, or other anomalous things that might have happened. They have to go by your 2019 990 amount. Next slide, please. Next we go to business demographics. There is up at the top left there, that red arrow is pointing to who is your customer base, a confusing question for nonprofits. B2B stands for business to business. B2C stands for business to consumer. Most nonprofits are business to consumer. And again, what type of business is it? What does your business do? And tell us more. There are drop-down menus there. And so choose your best, choose what looks closest to you. Lendistry understands that we don't all fit neatly into those categories. And on the left there, just below that red arrow that's pointing to unknown, you'll also see something that says NAICS code. If you are not familiar with that code, you can see to the right of that, it says click here to find your code. This is a standard business classification. It's not real common in nonprofits unless you do a lot of government grant work. but you'll need to just figure out which is the category that is closest to what you do in your nonprofit. And if it doesn't fit exactly, again, do your best so that you can continue to move through the application. Below that, they're asking for some demographics. Are you a women-led business, et cetera? These questions should be answered for the applicant or the senior management, your ED, CEO, and or the senior management team. It doesn't apply to the people that you serve. It applies to the applicant in this case. Thank you, and we'll move on to the next slide. Now we come into a number of other categories. The first red arrows is are 51% of the nonprofit's revenues derived from services in the 4 priority categories that we mentioned earlier. And once again, saying no does not disqualify you from the program. Again, you're asked if 51% or more of your clients identify as low and middle income. And you answer yes or no. If you say no, that does not disqualify you for the program. Going down below is where you enter your income and your revenue that we talked about earlier for those 2 quarters in 2019 and in 2020. And then down below in the pink, that third red arrow is going to ask you if you received any other government COVID relief funds. And that would be from programs like the Payroll Protection Program or PPP or EIDL, which are federal programs. I'm often asked if we got those grants, can we get this state grant too? And the answer is they're unrelated and you can get them, but what you can't do is double dip. So what that means is if you paid your payroll, if you used PPP to meet your payroll in September of 2020, you can't also use September 2020 payroll as an eligible expense in this program. You could use October or August 2020, but you can't submit the same expense to 2 different programs. And you'll also want to include here if you got any county or city funding that was COVID relief, so any unit of government. And if you don't have enough room to list all of your COVID relief, then what you want to write in here is a combined total of what you received, and then just take a Word document and make a little list of what you received and the amounts and upload that with your other documents. Next slide, please. Before you can move on, I know that this says that you're submitting an arts and cultural nonprofit. That's no longer available. It'll say you're submitting a nonprofit application, but this is the pop-up that you see before you complete your application. Once you hit submit, you cannot return and make any changes to this part of the application. And as I mentioned earlier, you also cannot go back and print a copy. So this is the place to verify that you are submitting a nonprofit organization. You'll type yes on that line. The boxes below will change such that you can hit submit. And then once you have submitted part 1 of your application, you have made an on-time application. You have met the deadline. You can go back and upload your documents at any time. We recommend doing that sooner rather than later because it helps Lendistry process your application more quickly. Next slide, please. Again, that's where you'll hit submit. The boxes will change. Next slide, please. Next, you will upload those documents that, remember, we made a list of earlier. You'll see a list of the types of documents. Click on the type of document and upload. Don't put all your documents under the same category. If you do, it's okay. Lendistry will straighten it out, but it takes longer to process your application. 15 megabytes is the limit for a document. Some folks have really long 990s, and if so, please compress your document or split it into 2 and label it clearly and upload it half at a time. And now we're going to return to Lucy for questions from our new applicants.
Okay, I'm still scrolling through the questions. But let's get started. We have quite a few, and I know we don't have a lot of time. So people are wondering whether it's even worth applying in round 6 if all of the round 1, 2, 3, 5 applicants are going to be carried over. Are those early applicants going to be prioritized? Is there even a chance for round 6 applicants?
There absolutely is. Again, prioritization is not on first come, first serve. All applicants are considered in every round, and I strongly encourage people not to skip applying because you think there's already too many applications in the pool. Everybody has a chance.
Okay. And then we have some out-of-state nonprofits who have done extensive work in California, and they're wondering if they're eligible.
I know this is something Janet and I chatted about recently. So Janet, I'm going to ask if you would weigh in on if an organization is headquartered out of state or, but has substantial operations here. Are they eligible for the program?
So they are eligible if they have a location in California and they have a certificate of foreign incorporation, which is required by the state for doing business in California. So as long as you can submit that certificate of incorporation and demonstrate that you have a location in California, you would be eligible.
Thank you for that. And that reminded me of a couple of other tips that we have for the application. One is you cannot use a PO box as your address. Lendistry must verify that there is a physical address associated with your application, and many people are working from home. It is okay to use a home address. And also, we talked a lot about using different email addresses. Please don't use email addresses that start with info@ or there's a list of the email addresses you should not use in our FAQs. Lendistry the system recognizes those as bots, and so don't use an info@ or no contact no reply kind of email address. Make it a person. Lucy, back to you.
Okay, so you did go over that Lendistry will be looking at comparative financial statements, and some new applicants are wondering, do you have to have had financial hardship to apply?
You do not have to have had financial hardship to apply. I encourage everybody to apply if you think you might be eligible.
And if you complete the 990 postcard form, is that enough, or is there additional confirmation required?
As we mentioned, that Lendistry will look at your 990 to determine your income to see that you qualify for the program between $1,000 and $2.5 million, and which grant level you are eligible for. However, the postcard doesn't list your income on it, so you need an additional document showing your income. And there's a couple different ones to choose from. See our FAQs on our website for more information.
Okay, and could you repeat the date that the organization has to have been founded by and in operation by to apply?
That is June 1, 2019. The organization has to have been in operation. You don't have to have had your 501c3 yet, et cetera, but you have to be able to document, show some kind of proof that you were providing programs or services or other activities on or before June 1, 2019.
Okay, and we have some people who have applied in round 4 and were helped by some of the partners who help with that round. Do they have to go back to that partner that helped them in round 4 when they're using a portal to apply for round 6?
That's a really good question, and thank you for that. As I mentioned, round 4 had a unique application portal. So the only thing you can go back to that portal for is to check on an application that was submitted in round 4 to start a new application in round 6. And remember that if you don't know yet if you're going to get funded in round 4, we do recommend that you reapply in round 6, even if you're on the wait list or waiting to be selected, because you probably are not going to hear whether your round 4 application was funded or not before the application period for round 6 closes. So, and it is a different application portal for round 6 than it was for round 4.
Okay, and then we have some questions about the applicant their name may not be on the 990, but they've got approval from the board to apply. And, they're concerned that their executive director, that it would be harder for their executive director to apply than for this other person to apply. Is it okay for them to be the applicant if they're not on the 990 and not the executive director, but have approval from the board?
It is okay for that person to apply, but you're going to want to go back into your statement of information that's on file with the state, and you can update that to include that person's name. And again, there's more information about that on the FAQs on our website. Lendistry will need to see some official document that has the applicant's name on it to verify that they are associated with the organization. And a lot of people have gone back and updated their statements of information. There's a nominal fee. I think it's $20, but it's not hard to do.
Okay. And then if people have questions for Lendistry, I know that some applicants have tried to get on the phone with Lendistry and encountered problems. And they're wondering, is it better to try email or better to stick with phone? Is the response time different from one to the other?
So Lendistry's phone line is open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. And yes, at times there can be high call volumes, especially when an application round is open. And so we do recommend trying the shortest wait times we found are first thing in the morning at about before 9 o'clock, between 7 and 9, and also late in the day between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. And with respect to the question, is it better to call or email? It really depends on what your question is. If you've received a communication from an individual at Lendistry, then you'll want to reply to that individual. If you, as we mentioned earlier, want to withdraw an earlier application, maybe you applied on the wrong application form, you can just send an email to careliefgrant@lendistry.com and include your application number. But if you're having technical issues, if you have questions about how to log in to check your status or other questions about your applications, please feel free to give me a call too. I do answer my phone. If I'm not available when you call, I will call you back. But if you have questions, if you're having technical issues, like it's telling me user not found in the system or something like that, that is, we don't have access to the system at CalNonprofits and can't check that for you. So you do need to contact Lendistry directly in those cases.
Okay, and I'm aware that we're at noon, so sounds like people have some information about who they can contact to get some of their questions answered. So I'm going to just turn it back over to you, Sue, to close.
Thank you. Next slide. And I know Janet has to dash, so first thing I'm going to say is thank you very much for your time today, Janet. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And I want to thank all of our speakers today. Thank you, Lucy, for doing such a great job with our questions and walking us up. And thanks, Michelle, for providing us with closed caption assistance. And next slide. Once again, here we have lots of resources. You're going to get these slides, so don't have to write too furiously. Please visit our website at calnonprofits.org. Visit our FAQs for lots of information. I want to thank our wonderful tech staff today, Christina Dragonetti and Christine Metropolis, who make everything run smoothly for us. And one last slide we have for you to tell you, make sure you know who we are at CalNonprofits. Lucy?
Oh, sure. Yes. If you're not a member of CalNonprofits, this slide shows you some great reasons why we would love to have you become a member. You can go to our website to learn more about how to do that, calnonprofits.org, and Christina's putting some additional information in the chat box, but we'd love to have you as a member. We are a membership organization.
Wonderful, thank you. And just to underscore, you do not have to be a member of CalNonprofits to apply through our application portal, but we hope you'll check us out. And with that, we're going to close. Wish everybody good luck. And again, please feel free to contact me, Sue Sigler, by phone or by email, and get those round 6 applications in beginning Wednesday.